how are you all tonight? Oh, good. I'm at that point in the day where I'm between my Dayquil and my NyQuil, and everything's really surreal. I'm really happy to be here with all of you, though. So, a few things about me. I'm really clumsy. I'm not very athletic, but I tread water like a boss. I challenge any of you to a water treading contest, and I promise you that I will win. And when I was little, I would just jump into the lake and have my mom time me. And eventually I got so good, I would say, start the timer, come and get me in like 2.5 hours. And my mom would happily do that and go about her business and collect her things and come and get me 2 hours later or so. And I confuse this with playing because I'm an only child. But in all honesty, I feel most at home floating in water. The first time I went scuba diving, I was in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. I rolled onto my back and I looked up to see the sun refracting through the water. There was a school of fish swimming around me, and through the rays of light, it was honestly the first time I ever believed in heaven. I was so at peace that I didn't realize that I sank to the bottom of the ocean. And I laid there for 40 minutes until my oxygen completely ran out. And I had to make a quick ascent to the surface. And back on the ground, I realized that life didn't make quite so much sense. Because of this, I've always struggled with my choice that I've made to spend most of my time in the Midwest. Completely landlocked. It's really easy for me to get lost. In the months after my grandfather's death, my grandma was lost. They had been together for over 50 years. And now my grandmother is a devout Catholic, and she would pore over her rosary beads, and he slipped away and was just left in her prayers. And I was in college at the time, and I took up treading and scuba diving in my school pool in the winter in Fargo, North Dakota. And we were all just reaching around somehow trying to stay grounded. And when I finally got to Chicago to spend some time with my grandma, I wanted to get her out of the house. So we went to the Shed Aquarium. It's one of my favorite places to go. I could spend hours just watching all the fish, and I sit there and I have quiet moments, and it's one of the only places where I feel like I actually commune. My grandma, on the other hand, was having none of it. She would look and try to drag me on to the next room really quick until we got to the otters. The otters are my favorite. And I tell my grandma about how otters hold hands while they sleep so they don't drift away from each other. And for some reason, she seems to like this. So we actually spend about an hour watching the otters before we go home. That night, my grandma asked me if I want to stay in her room with her. And I say I will, but, I'm going to go to bed in a little while, not quite as early as she was. And seeing her sleep was one of the oddest things. I mean, she's a very small woman, and she sleeps all the way in the corner of the bed with her arm sticking straight out, just reaching. And the first night I was comfortable in my own corner since it was an extra large king-size bed, but night after night it's the same thing. And on the last night there, in the middle of the night, I wake up because my hand is being yanked on, and I was just close enough that she grabbed it. And she held it. And I laid there awake for a long time. She thought I was sleeping, and I heard her whisper my grandfather's name. And I lay there as she cried softly. She spent the night holding my hand, trying not to float away. Time goes by. A couple years later, I visit her, and she now has pink hair. She had confused the Febreze for hairspray, and that's what happened. Unfortunately, though, this wasn't an isolated incident. She started getting mad at me for not returning her phone calls until we figured out she was actually using her remote control as a phone. And all of a sudden she thinks 6 p.m. is the middle of the night, and she can't understand why so many children and old people are still out in restaurants in the middle of the night when we can get her out of her house. And she thinks her grandchildren are now her actual children, and she doesn't understand why we always leave at night and why people are stealing her kids from her. And we don't know how to handle this. I don't need to get into the water because now I just feel like I'm drowning on land. The last time I saw her, I showed her some videos of otters and reminded her that she had liked them. And she laughed, and she said they reminded her of her husband, who she no longer knew the name of. And I asked why. Because every day we were married, he held my hand all night, just like the otters. And my grandma is sinking away from us, but every night she goes to bed at 6 p.m., in the middle of the night, at 6 p.m., and she sleeps on her back with her arm out, reaching towards him. And I just have to trust that the next time she holds his hand, it's going to be because she's home again. Thank you.